Hello and welcome to The Insider, a show designed to clue you into the biggest news, events, and announcements inside the video games industry, discussing with you some things you may know, some things you may not, and glue hold it all together is a little bit of my own opinion. My name is Paul James, thank you very much for watching, and let's kick off with our episode of The Insider. So the great Hideo Kojima, the legend behind IP such as Metal Gear Solid, has thrown a bit of curveball out there. As is well known, he's been working on Death Stranding, a PlayStation 4/5 exclusive IP that has been well underway. It's been speculated a lot about. There's been lots of rumours, lots of innuendo, lots of questions and comments and concerns and confusion, and really most of that hasn't gone away. But one thing is for sure, we're going to be playing the game this year, and that's thrown into chaos a lot of predictions and a lot of thoughts that a lot of people, such as myself and other far more learned people, had established about what was going to happen with PlayStation this year and in the lead up to the PS5 and even the years beyond that. So in this week's episode of The Insider, we're going to break down a bit of that and see what it all means going forward.
Right. Nothing's off limits for them. Not even engineering void outs. They're extremists like the demons everywhere, plotting in the shadows.
So a lot of us had a pretty clear idea in our heads about how things were going to progress for PlayStation going forward. And the first of the upcoming big three titles to release, most people considered to be The Last of Us Part 2 or Ghost of Tsushima. The general theory was that what Kojima was doing with Death Stranding was going to be at least another 18-24 months from now, despite some comments that he'd made to the contrary that were all along the lines of the game's progressing faster than you thought, or than any of you think. And I think in spite of that, none of us really considered a possibility that the game may actually release within this calendar year. And yet, November 8th is the game's release date. That throws into some chaos, some questions that people have been asking about The Last of Us Part 2. There'd been rumours and leaks about that that had emerged throughout the course of the week as well. And beginning next, we're going to look at some of those games and those dates and what all might mean for them going forward. So let's begin with The Last of Us Part 2, the game that most of us had considered to be the first of those three to come off the PlayStation first-party conveyor belt, which clearly is not the case. There'd been a rumour emerge from a Spanish source throughout the course of this past week, alongside the timing of this Death Stranding news, that suggested that the game was going to be releasing this year, and that we'd be learning more about it in a State of Play episode that was going to air this week, by the time that this episode has actually gone live. Now clearly that's not the case. The speculation, and this is now being compiled, there's multiple sources coming together here and lots of people talking. Jason Schreier was one of those, and I think if any of you follow this show, you know how much I personally respect Jason Schreier. And he spoke about how he hadn't heard anything that suggested the game was going to come out this year, and at this particular point, especially given the Death Stranding news, he was of the opinion, and presumably informed by a few sources that he has, that the game was going to launch in the early 2020 window. Which, upon reflection, now knowing what we know about Death Stranding, I think is a very good window. It's not ideal. The Last of Us Part 2 is the game I anticipate more than any other right now. But Kojima's games need some spotlight. This is a guy that demands attention. He puts out good quality games, and presumably Death Stranding will be no different, despite the fact that it's coming out quite quickly in the end. His games need spotlight. It's a big first-party PlayStation title, and it's going to look great in their portfolio. And it's going to be something they can build their 2019 holiday period around. The Last of Us Part 2 maybe could have been knocked out a bit quicker, but we know how pedantic Naughty Dog is about creating the best possible product. And there's probably heat on there's no more heat on any one particular game than the heat that is under the development of The Last of Us Part 2. So give them all the time they need. Ghost of Tsushima, on the other hand, there's a lot of questions to be asked now. Sucker Punch have been working on this game since the release of Infamous First Light, which was the DLC kind of standalone experience that came with Infamous Second Son, which was a 2014 game. they've been working on their latest title, Ghost of Tsushima, for quite some time now. So I feel like there's some questions that need to be answered there. We know that this game is a beautiful looking game and they're trying something very different for them. But how far is this game away from here? We know that the PS5 is getting closer. What sort of bearing does that all have? Are we going to get a cross-console or generational release? There's a lot of questions that need answering about that one.
Do you surrender?
A lot of people had built their opinions about when the PS5 was going to release around the launches of these three key games. And so, I think understandably, a lot of people are starting to question, okay, so what does this mean for the PS5 and when that launches? And at this particular point in time, I'm going to say absolutely nothing. It doesn't change a single thing. All it changes is the order of these releases that we kind of assembled in our own heads. Some of us rightly, some of us wrongly. You know, everyone had their own different opinions on these games and when they were going to come out. The only thing that might inform and potentially change any plans that PlayStation had for the launch of the PS5 is what Xbox does at E3 in the next couple of weeks. If Xbox comes out on that stage and declares, okay, the console's coming out in, say, our Australian autumn of 2020, and PlayStation's initial plan was to release in the holiday of 2020, similar to what we've seen in most generations in the past, and really it's the Nintendo Switch that has bucked that trend, then maybe that forces their hand and they change their plans a little bit, and that maybe changes the plan for the likes of The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima. Their respective release dates maybe are affected by changes to the console launch. But even then, things like console launches are so planned out months and months and even up to years in advance because of the manufacturing factor that needs to go into this thing. They're still creating PS4s whilst they're starting to develop their PS5s. And it means that you can't churn out many at a time. You've got to maintain the stock for the PS4 that is obviously still being sold at retail as we speak, whilst building your stockpile of PS5s so that they're ready to go for when the launch arrives. It's this balancing act that needs to be managed there. So it's hard for me to see the change of plans here for, well, again in our own heads, for Death Stranding and then in turn The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima having any impact. It's still quite hard in spite of the possibility that maybe Xbox does come out and say that Xbox Scarlet, that's the code name for the next generation, is going to come out in the March window, for example, of 2020. It's hard to see these things impact the launch of the PS5 because that thing, there's so many moving parts that are involved. If it turns out Xbox beats them to the punch, Xbox might just beat them to the punch and there's nothing they can do about it. And we just have to hope, as PlayStation fans, that they can claw it back from there.
I'm gonna find, and I'm gonna kill every last one of them.
And so that concludes this week's episode of The Insider. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing. All those buttons are down below here. And hit that notification bell, that way you're alerted to every new video the moment it goes live on the channel. That includes Patched, more of The Insider, Player 2 Plays, Late Game Review, Gamer School, and a whole bunch more. There's some awesome stuff there, so please be sure to go and check it out. Visit the website, player2.net.au, where you'll find reviews, previews, opinion pieces, news, features, the Player 2 Writers Draft, links to the E3 Hub, as well as our podcast series, Dev Diary, and the Player 2 Pixelcast. There's some awesome stuff on the website. Go and subscribe to those podcast feeds. There's some great stuff there, and I hope you enjoy it. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/player2au, and kick in a few bucks. At the lower tiers, you get early access to episodes. The higher tiers, you get monthly episode exclusives, and the ability to join us in the Player 2 Pixelcast. Finally, there's Twitter. You can catch me at Paul James Games, the website you find at Player2au, and until next time, next week, where we'll talk a lot about E3, given the proximity from that episode to the event beginning. Thanks a lot for watching in the meantime, and I'll see you next week.
'Cause I'm wrong.